Well, yes. Today I will talk about the Japan's proactive defense policy and some implication on the South China Sea dispute. Yes. Through the last week, the front page of the Japanese newspaper covered mainly two topics. One is a Japanese cabinet decision to submit the bills to the Diet, the Japanese parliament, regarding the seamless security legislation. And the second one is Chinese intensified threat in the South China Sea. So today's my presentation is to examine a relation, if any, between the two issues. Last year, on July 1st, last year, the Japanese cabinet made a decision to reinterpret Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution. You know that in this article, the first paragraph renounced any war, and the second paragraph, clearly stated that the Japanese will abandon any military forces. Well, although the Japanese government founded the self-defense forces in 1954, the government continuously stated that they were not military forces banned under the Constitution, but they are strengths to defend Japan and the Japanese people. So it is established the policy that Japan would not exercise the right of collective self-defense, although Japan holds such a right. And the self-defense forces shall be limited to the minimum level appropriate enough to respond to the direct attack to Japan from another state. So in the government policy, the right of self-defense had been categorically, the right of collective self-defense had been categorically denied for the practical purpose to defend another state. However, as I mentioned, the last year, the Japanese government changed its policies to enable the Japan to, exercise the right of collective self-defense, not individual self-defense. So we have to examine some, situations surrounding Japan currently. As a matter of fact, we have the two main international issues. One is North Korea's development of nuclear weapons and some missiles, and Chinese proactive actions on the Senkaku Island. Especially, from the 2012, the Chinese government ships and aircraft have entered the territorial water of the island, arguably Japanese territory, which escalated the tension between Japan and China. Moreover, in December 2013, the Chinese government set up the air defense identification zones. So some Japanese people fear that the situation between Japan and China is reaching a flashing point. However, this situation does not necessarily prompt the Japanese government to expand to the exercise of the right of self-defense, to include the collective self-defense, because they can be, the Japanese possible military action can be explained on the basis of the individual self-defense, not collective self-defense. Therefore, the security issues with which Japan is now faced are not necessarily cases requiring the right of collective self-defense. All right. the Prime Minister Abe Shinzo repeatedly stated that, even though that Japan would change the policy, that Japan may react to a future threat in a limited application of the rules of the collective self-defense. So that the cabinet set out 3 requirements for the collective self-defense. Right. The first, when an armed attack against a foreign country that is in a close relation with Japan occurs, and as a result threatens Japan's survival and poses a clear danger to fundamentally overturn the people's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Secondly, when there is no other appropriate means available to repel the attacks and ensure Japan's survival and protect its people. And thirdly, finally, the use of force to the minimum extent to necessary should be interpreted to be permitted under the Constitution as a measure for self-defense. So you can see that the 3 requirements for Japan to exercise the right of collective self-defense. And the second and the third requirement are really coming from the requirement under international law. So it is not a restrictive interpretation of the collective self-defense. Then probably the first requirement set by the Japanese government is only a restrictive, on the application of the right of collective self-defense. So when we evaluate such a policy, the changing policy of the Japanese government, we have to also examine that, the concept of the collective self-defense from the perspective of international law. There are traditionally the 3 doctrines concerning the right of collective self-defense. One is this one. The right of collective self-defense is exercised jointly by 2 or more than 2 victims state of armed attack by third state. Each victim state is in position to rely on the right of individual self-defense to use force against a wrongdoing. Therefore, it is a joint exercise of the individual self-defense. That is the first definition of the collective self-defense. The second one is that the doctrine to say that the collective self-defense may be considered as a defense for another state. Kelsen argues that Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations confers the right to use force not only upon the attacked state, but also the other states which unite with the attacked state in order to assist it in its defense. So that is a formulation, made by the Kelsen. It is really the, defensive right for another state. And the third doctrine is like that. The collective self-defense is conceptualized as if the assisting state should defend its vital interests as well as the direct victim states. The right to defend another state must be invoked by a state whose vital interests are threatened by an attack by the third state. So defensive action taken by the state for the victim state would be practically tantamount to defense of itself. In this way, for example, Rota Pact insists that a member of the United Nations is permitted to have recourse to action in self-defense, not only when it is itself the object of armed attack, but also when such attack is directed against any other state or states whose safety and independence are deemed vital to the safety of independence of the states, thus resisting the aggressor. Well, the International Court of Justice, as a world court, seemed to support the second doctrine on the collective self-defense in the Nicaragua case between Nicaragua and the United States. The court, the ICJ, did not ask for the United States, basing their use of force on the right of collective self-defense, to show that the United Nations had an interest, UN interests were under attack by Nicaragua, but only expressed additional requirement to the common requirement for the right of self-defense. The one is a declaration, and the second is a request by a victim state. If the International Court of Justice is correct in saying that the states have a right of collective armed response to acts which constitute an armed attack, then the Japanese position is rather restrictive in its understanding of the right of collective self-defense. The Japanese policy may appear to be a reminiscent of the third doctrine, which makes the right conditional on the vital interest of assisting states, Japan, to be attacked. So the Japanese government does not intend to defend all the states under attack by a third state. So which state can be, eligible to getting the support from the Japanese in the military sense? We have to examine the close relations with Japan when we talk about the Japanese possible use of the right of collective self-defense. It is undeniable that the Asian countries surrounding the South China Sea have kept close relationship with Japan to some degrees, and might make a request for military assistance from Japan if an unexpected military clash with China is brought about incidentally. Because there are so many Japanese nationals stay and work in those states, and also that a huge amount of money has been invested in those areas by the Japanese companies. So we could say that Japan has a close relationship with the other Asian countries surrounding the South China Sea. However, the Japanese government does not always have a willingness to defend the attacked state in the regions in the collective self-defense. The definition of close relationship with Japan was given in the meeting of the Budget Committee of the Legislation Bureau, the Budget Committee of the House of Councillors on July 15th last year. Foreign country that is in a close relationship with Japan is a state which share the common interest to respond to an armed attack from a third state as a common danger and express its intention to do so in cooperation with Japan. It may be a very, it is not a straightforward word, but the connotation is very simple. The existence of alliance is a sine qua non, necessary condition for the exercise of the Japanese government to exercise the Japanese right of collective self-defense. So Japanese government has no intention to defend other states than the United States. However, Japan may take some defensive action in the South China Sea, although it may not defend directly a state in the region from an armed attack, possibly by China. The Japan and the US alliance had guidelines on the mutual defense cooperations agreed upon this, between the two states in 1997. That is old guidelines. It said that both states would act in cooperation in situations in areas surrounding Japan that will have an important influence on Japan's peace and security. So you can see that it has the geographical limitation on the Japanese and the U.S. cooperation, military cooperations. However, this year, the Japan and the United States concluded the new guidelines concerning the defense cooperation on April 27 this year. In these guidelines, the geographical limitation is now removed from the new guidelines. Instead, they emphasize the global nature of Japan-US alliance. and stated that alliance will respond to situations that will have an important influence on Japan's peace and security, and that such situation cannot be defined geographically. The Japan's self-defense force might act globally for the maintenance of security of Japan and the United States. And quite recently, the South China Sea dispute has attracted the attention of Japan and the United States. On April 29th, the 2 days after the guidelines were concluded, the Prime Minister Abe Shinzo addressed to a joint meeting of the United States Congress and touched upon the importance of the sea lines of the communication, saying that as regards the state of Asian waters, we must make the vast seas stretching from the Pacific to the Indian Oceans seas of peace and freedom, where all follow the rule of law. So this is a manifest expression on the readiness of Japan to react in a case where an armed attack against a third state in that region has a harmful effect on the safety of navigation of the Japanese ships. So I want to conclude that, probably Japan would not defend the Asian countries under attack. But if and once the United States is involved in an armed conflict, then Japan would assist the United States forces. So Japan may be one of the another unstable element to this region in that conflict. Thank you very much. I'm sorry.